A new blog post just was published by Mozilla, by the president of Mozilla, Mark Surman, entitled "A Free and Open Internet Shouldn't Come at the Expense of Privacy." And the contents of that little blog post that came from the president of Mozilla, the makers of Firefox, is causing many people to go, is Mozilla an advertising company now? Are they not really the Mozilla we've known and loved for all these years? Are they really an advertising company now? And all the readers and listeners and viewers of the Lunduke Journal collectively went, yeah, we've known that for a few years now. Where have you guys been? They've been pretty obvious about it. This literally is crazy to me, because the Lunduke Journal has been reporting on this for quite some time, and most of the mainstream tech press has been basically telling me I'm crazy, that I seriously don't know what I'm talking about because I read the words of their statements, look at the actual finances of the corporation, and look at their tax records and tell people this is what their business is. And now all of a sudden people are like, oh, maybe the Lunduke Journal was right. Maybe you think? Let's take a quick little look at this. This is again from Mark Surman, the president of Mozilla. This is essentially this executive director of the Mozilla Foundation. Mozilla has a very weird corporate structure. They have a foundation and a corporation. The two are kind of sort of separate. At various times, the head of both the corporation and the foundation have been the same person, as was the case with Mitchell Baker, who left earlier this year during a massive, almost Game of Thrones style power struggle within the organization. But as the last few years have unfolded, both the foundation and the corporation have made it clear that their ongoing business strategy will move away from Firefox and web browsing and towards AI and advertising. Now, that's not my wishy thinking here. That's just what they seem to be doing. And it's interesting to follow along with this for many reasons. In part because it has an impact on the broader industry, in part because many people follow them, and in part just because it's such a dramatic shift from the open source centric organization that they once were. So I'm just going to read a couple of snippets here, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into this. This is again from Mark Surman, the president of Mozilla, the executive director of the Mozilla Foundation. How do we prevent huge segments of the world from being priced out of access through paywalls? This is an interesting statement that they make here. Mozilla is, as you read through this, you'll start to see this. They are attempting to frame their actions through the guise of they are your saviors, right? There are two evils that Mozilla is pointing to, and they're showing you that they will be your savior. The first evil is paywalls. And what they mean by paywalls is anything that you pay money for, right? From the Mozilla standpoint is you should never have to pay money, right, for a thing. You shouldn't have to buy a book. You shouldn't have to pay for a subscription service for a movie, anything, right? Nothing. No paywalls, right? So from Mozilla's standpoint, that's an evil that they're going to save you from. And the second evil that Mozilla is presenting to you is that of cookies. And this is a fascinating approach here. Mozilla's stance is that cookies, right, are an inherent evil, and they're going to save you from cookies through something called privacy preserving attribution, which we'll get into in a moment. And the idea is privacy preserving attribution, PPA, will replace cookies. Now, what's fascinating about this, and this is something I want you to keep in mind as we're about to read some of their quotes, is the idea behind privacy preserving attribution is essentially cookies, except that Mozilla controls it, right? Your data is not stored locally so much as it's stored with Mozilla, right? Their servers have and are the brokers for that data, which they then pass along to advertisers. In this case, who is the advertiser? It's also Mozilla. They purchased an advertising company, so they collect your data and then feed it to the advertising company, which is also Mozilla. Do you see how this is working here? They are telling you that cookies are evil. We have to replace cookies, and you're going to replace them with something that effectively does essentially the same thing as cookies, only even more controlled tightly by Mozilla, who is now controlling all of your data and acting as the advertising broker on top of all of that. So keep that in mind as we go through this. Quote, but for right now on the internet of today, a big part of the answer is online advertising, right? Online advertising is your savior. That's the Mozilla stance. That is there are problems with the internet where you have to use money. Well, advertising will come and save you. Advertising is the angels on high that will save you. That's the Mozilla stance. Quote, we started engaging in this space because the way the industry works today is fundamentally broken. It doesn't put people first, it's not privacy respecting, and it's increasingly anti-competitive. There have been better options. Mozilla can play a key role in creating these better options, not just by advocating for them, but also by actually building them. And when they say these options, what they're talking about is data, user data collection, user data filtering and analysis, and advertising, specifically ad brokering, selling ad space. That's what they're talking about here. So when they say things like we'll build better options, they're talking about ad brokering, data, user data collection, and user data filtering and analysis. Mozilla has become more active in online advertising over the past few years. According that's a quote from them, and they're right. They're right about that. And this is again something that the Lunduke Journal has been reporting on for quite some time. We all know if you go to lunduke.locals.com, you'll find, or just lunduke.com, you'll find a ton of articles around the rather peculiar finances of Mozilla. It is the finances of Mozilla Corporation and the foundation have not made sense for quite a long time. I've covered them rather in depth, going into their tax records and where the money goes and where the money comes from and how the money gets funneled to political advocacy groups and all sorts of things over the last few years. But where it's really got truly interesting is, as of last year, this was from an article from October of 2023, so just almost exactly 1 year ago, just from a few days ago. Mozilla downplaying Firefox, moving into AI. Firefox is not part of Mozilla's official future strategy. And this article, again, over at the Lunduke Journal, which is where all the reporting on this stuff is coming from. That's not just to toot my own horn. It's just I'm the only one that seems to cover this in detail. When they announced the future of Mozilla, this was about a year ago, they made it very, very clear that the future of Mozilla is artificial intelligence and advertising, right? They made it very clear. In fact, when they unveiled their, next 25-year roadmap, Firefox was not part of that roadmap, right? At no point in that were they like, man, we're going to make Firefox an even better web browser. No. They just talked about AI, lots of different AI projects that they are investing in. And that was just the beginning of that spree. They now have several AI companies that operate under the Mozilla umbrella. They're really heavily focused on how will they earn revenue from AI and on advertising, right? They've made that very, very clear, right? So when they say they've been more active in online advertising over the last few years, they really do mean it. we've seen some weird examples of their online early advertising. They purchased an advertising company in Germany some years back. They famously created a deal with the TV show Mr. Robot, where they forced all Firefox users to blindly, without knowing it, have an extension installed into Firefox across the world that advertised the Mr. Robot TV show. Now that particular extension, it didn't do a tremendous amount of data collection. It was more a goofy advertisement, but Mozilla kind of tipped their hand at how far they were willing to go in order to earn a buck through advertising, right? They knew they needed to advertise. And a lot of this makes sense. Recently, this was just, August 12th of this year. Again, another article at the Lunduke Journal. Mozilla faces financial uncertainty after Google loses lawsuit. All right, so what this essentially is Google had an antitrust lawsuit brought against them several years back. The U.S. Department of Justice started this lawsuit against them, basically saying, Google, you are a monopoly when it comes to online search engine stuff, right? And part of that was that Google pays a relatively large amount of money to make sure that web browsers set Google as the default search engine, right? And penalizes those companies like Mozilla or Apple or others who make it easy to switch to different search engines in their browser, right? They don't get as much money from Google if Firefox or Safari make it easy to switch to other browsers or other search engines. And so now Google lost this lawsuit, right? The loss means that it's potentially going to be restricted Google from paying these exorbitant amounts of money to Mozilla to be the default search engine. Now, here's the thing. Let me see. Do I have this here? Mozilla, I don't know if I have this in front of me, but in a few of my articles, including the Firefox Money article, which came out, 2 years ago now, it's very clear that over 80% of the revenue that Mozilla gets is through that search engine placement. So if that dries up in the next couple of months, which it very likely will, I mean, Google is appealing this, but I don't see how they are going to win. They can take this all the way up to the Supreme Court. They aren't going to win this one. The facts are just not on Google's side as far as the law is concerned. So whether you like it or not, Google is going to lose this case ultimately, and will no longer be able to pay these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to Mozilla every year to keep them afloat, which means Mozilla needs new revenue and it needs it now, right? So they have to change their business strategy, and they got to change it fast. So the fact that they're being more active in online advertising and AI as business models is not at all surprising. It makes a certain amount of sense. I don't love it, but it makes a certain amount of sense that they're doing it. I also want to point out their theory, right? They present this as sort of like a scientific theory of online advertising, which is a little bit peculiar of a way to approach it. But they make it very clear that they want to engage in online regulation in legal regulation of online advertising. So what they're saying is that, so I'll just read a bit of it to you. Over the years, improving privacy and consumer protection in advertising while enabling competition has been at the core of our policy efforts. So advertising competition is a critical thing for Mozilla. Now you could say, well, that's good. I like advertising competition. Competition's great. I like competition, yes. But that also plays into their business strategy. They need to be able to compete with Google AdSense in order to effectively bring in the kind of money that they need in order to replace the Google search engine web default placement revenue, right? So they're going to be pushing for more laws in multiple places. They specifically call out some of the laws in the UK in their proposals in order to make that easier for them. And again, you can understand why they're doing this from a business standpoint. And then here's something that really jumps out at me is they also talk about standards and products. Okay. Now, I'm just going to read a few quotes to you, and I want you to bear in mind what we were talking about earlier of Mozilla replacing cookies with privacy-preserving protection. Okay. We are bringing the same expertise and commitment to the advertising space. This includes collaborating on interoperable private attribution, and contributing to the private advertising technology community group. This would make it practical to more strictly limit the most invasive practices like ubiquitous third-party cookies. The goal of this work is to identify legitimate, lawful, and non-harmful use cases and promote a healthy web by developing privacy-respecting technical mechanisms for those use cases. Now, that's a lot of buzzwords, but we need to parse in there what that means. What they're talking about is they do not want people using cookies. Mozilla does not control cookies. Mozilla can control the privacy-preserving attribution, the cookie replacement, which then would make Mozilla the lead broker of online advertising and online data collection. You see how this is working here? So when they're talking about standards, yes, they are proposing these as standards. Standards that Mozilla controls, standards that Mozilla creates, standards that tie in directly to Mozilla servers. And then they talk about their products, right? Building these things is the only way for Mozilla to prove these hypotheses, right? So they have these hypotheses that they need these standards to replace cookies, to drive all of this advertising revenue, which will save you from the evils of paying $5 a month for a subscription somewhere, right? So how do they do that? Building things is the only way for Mozilla to prove these hypotheses. This is their quote. I'm going to read the rest of this paragraph here to you now because it's critical. For years, Mozilla products have supported an advertising business without the privacy invasive techniques common today by deploying features such as total cookie protection and enhanced tracking protection to protect our users, and will continue to explore ways to add advertiser value. Key, they will explore ways to add advertiser value. How do you add advertiser value? Data collection. That's how you add advertiser value while respecting user privacy. Including by exploring how we can support other businesses in achieving these goals via Anonym. What is Anonym? Anonym is an advertising agency that Mozilla purchased. This is part of Mozilla Corporation. Anonym is owned by Mozilla fully. It's a subsidiary. So Mozilla tracks you. That information, that privacy-preserving attribution, in other words, your user data, is sent to Mozilla servers and then funneled over to the Anonym servers. But they're definitely separate and not the same company. Wink, wink. Our goal, they continue, is to build a model to demonstrate how ads can sustain a business online while respecting people's privacy. Yeah. This theory and the work we and the work to test it will become an increasingly integral part of the discussions we already have underway with regulators. They want this to be the law, and civil society, consumers and developers, and advertisers, publishers, and platforms. Right. So they're building this right now. I mean, I've been talking, let's see, where is this here? Mozilla goes anti-privacy, pro-advertising. After buying advertising company, the browser maker goes all in on data collection. That's an article I published on July of this year, specifically talking about how they added privacy-preserving attribution into Firefox already. It's happening. I'm going to read a little bit of that article to you now, because the phrase privacy preserving attribution sounds amazing. Privacy, great. Preserve privacy, awesome. Attribution, well, that's just attributes. So preserve privacy and attributes. Okay, we're great. It sounds good until you dive into the details. So you have to understand Mozilla is the goal is replace cookies with PPA, privacy preserving attribution. Make that the law of the land, make that the de facto standard, and have that tie into Mozilla servers, wherein Mozilla then acts as your advertising broker, your core advertising house with AI. From the article, this is in essence a bit of functionality specifically designed for online advertisers and websites which implement advertising, which collects and reports browsing activity back to the advertising companies. Now, naming it privacy preserving attribution is a stroke of deceptive genius, as it truly does not preserve privacy by design. This is an example of doublespeak. It is in line with war is peace, freedom is slavery, 2 + 2 = 5. Privacy preserving attribution is just like that. It is doublespeak. That is not what it does. To fully understand the issue, let's look at how this privacy preserving attribution works from a very high level. So first, the Firefox web browser collects your data as you browse a website, right? That data is then sent to a Mozilla server. Mozilla then bundles all that data from multiple users together into batches, into just certain sized batches, and sends those batches of data to the servers of advertisers. Now, in theory, this would, and at least from a high-level descriptive standpoint, this would allow some of the data being sent to advertisers to be potentially a little bit more private, or at least slightly more obfuscated by having that data of multiple users all smashed together. There are 3 key, very important problems with that, and these are not problems that are just, oh, we have to find a way to fix this. These are by design, and I need to walk this through because these are non-negotiable things. The first, the data being sent to Mozilla, that Mozilla server, is not anonymous and is not private. Mozilla knows everything, right? So that data is sent to Mozilla. They know your IP address, they know your user agent, they know your physical location essentially, and they have all that tied together with the attributes that are being sent. What are those attributes? Well, what websites you're on, what you're clicking, what you're searching for, essentially everything that cookies could and already are used for, and then some. The second key problem here is that Mozilla now owns an advertising company, meaning that Mozilla is the advertiser, which means that Mozilla is sending your private identifiable data from one of their servers, bloop, to another one of their servers, right? Now, even if neither of those 2 points were true, right, which they are, there is enough data sent, even in batches, to reconstruct personal identifiable information. And as I point out here, privacy-preserving attribution appears to be custom designed to give the appearance of privacy without actually providing true privacy. Now, what's fascinating is when we take all of this into context of what has been happening at Mozilla over the last few years, and the last half year or plus, the 9-10 months especially. It is an absolutely wild ride, and it starts to paint a picture of craziness, of absolute insanity, of what's happening inside the organization. Back in June of this year, I published an article entitled "Mozilla Sued for Discrimination by Former CEO to Be," right? And I describe it as a Game of Thrones style power struggle, and I really can't think of a better way to describe it. This was sent to us here. We received the legal documents regarding a lawsuit filed against Mozilla, right, the makers of Firefox, by a former C-level executive. And I'm gonna read the bullet points to you now, in case you've forgotten any of this or simply never knew, because it relates to exactly what's happening here. First, the Mozilla Chief Product Officer, the CPO, was being groomed, prepared to take over as the new CEO, right? He'd been there a long time, and he was the CEO to be. He was being worked with by the current CEO to take her place when the time came, right? Now, that CEO to be, the guy that was gonna be the CEO anytime now, had to take some medical leave in order to treat cancer, right? He got cancer, he needed to take a little medical leave. So he did that. In the days before he returned from medical leave, right? He was ready to come back to work full time after his medical leave, after treating his cancer and all that. The then serving CEO of Mozilla, Mitchell Baker, was fired by the Mozilla board. And this was like 2 or 3 days beforehand, before this new CEO to be came back and was essentially going to pretty quickly become the new CEO. The board fired the current CEO without warning. Boom, gave her the boot. The board of Mozilla then installed one of their own board members, a woman named Laura Chambers, as the new CEO, right? They put her in place. And they did this within days before that new CEO to be could get back to the office from his medical leave, right? They did it boom, 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 boom. No one knew, did it really fast. Cloak and dagger, cover of darkness, sort of crazy power struggle. And there's a lot more details here. The story is insane. I highly recommend you read that article if you have not. It is crazy. It is absolutely insane. But what it paints a picture of is an organization that is being driven from powers at the top, individuals on the board of directors who are seeking to fundamentally change what Mozilla is, right? So they've gone from, we're going to make an open source web browser engine, which was their initial thing, to we're going to make an open source web browser, which is where Firefox came from. And they were that for many years, advocating for open web standards, a free and open web, yada, 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 and pushing Firefox. And for a time, Firefox was kind of almost the king of web browsing for a period of time. Now, it's been a while since that's been the case, and the board clearly felt like, with the resources that they had, hundreds of millions of dollars coming in every year from Google, potentially about to dry up, they wanted to take Mozilla in a totally new direction, right? Essentially utilizing Firefox as an expendable resource to migrate the whole company towards advertising, data collection, data mining and processing, and artificial intelligence. And now what's crazy is if you go look through Mozilla's blogs and whatnot, you will find a steady stream of articles discussing their new adventures in AI companies and advertising companies and data mining and the like. This is a whole new organization that was taken over from the board level on down and pushed in a whole new direction. It's absolutely fascinating what is happening here. Now, if this was the end of the story, it's dramatic. It's fun, it's interesting, but ultimately, considering the ever-declining Firefox market share, it becomes almost irrelevant. right? Like it's a bummer that, you know, one of the great granddaddies of open source software becomes this. That's a bummer. It's a bummer to see one of the truly viable alternative web browsing engines go down this dark path. That's all a bummer, and you hate to see it, but we can move on from it. Where it starts to get a little bit more troublesome is Mozilla has made it very clear that their goal is to seek regulatory change, right? Again, their goal is to push through regulations. Their goal is to work with governments to pass laws which make the cookie replacements that they are championing, that they are pushing, that they are developing, that they are running servers for, that they are building a business around, is the default, is the de facto. And it's all in the name of saving you, saving me. They've got to save us from the evils of cookies. They've got to save us from people that hate privacy. But what's fascinating is Mozilla's solution violates our privacy more than large portions of the advertising agencies out there that I would say really don't protect our privacy at all. Like, I'm not liking any of these solutions, and Mozilla comes along with one that's almost somehow worse. They lied to us about it. They know they lied to us about it. And they're hoping, they're operating under the assumption that all of us will look at phrases like privacy preserving attribution and read these blog posts filled with buzzwords, so many key buzzwords where they're fighting competition and protecting our privacy and getting rid of those mean, nasty cookies. And we're gonna go, yes, Mozilla. Yes, thank you, Mozilla. Please find a way to give some of your hundreds of millions of dollars to lawmakers in order to get laws passed to make your savior technology the new technology, Mozilla. They're assuming we're going to just nod and smile and go with it. And so far, there have been very few examples of tech press who have legitimately fought back against what has increasingly become not just an 800-pound gorilla, but an agent for anti-privacy and badness within, for lack of a better word, within the online space. I'm hoping that even though the Lunduke Journal's coverage of this over the last months and years has mostly been purposefully ignored by the mainstream tech press, I know a lot of you have read it because some of these articles, I did one article related to Mozilla and then another one that followed it up on Wikipedia that was like 20 some odd million people read those articles, like on Twitter alone. Like, I mean, it massive amounts of you are seeing this information, but the tech press, besides us, mostly is ignoring this. There's a few articles out there here and there that will touch on it, but mostly you just see like a random nerds here and there will write a blog post that says something like, man, this privacy preserving attribution stuff, this is bupkis. Well, it's time, finally, I'm hoping, because Mozilla has been so consistently beating this drum of privacy preserving attribution and advertising and everything else so consistently, I'm hoping that they've finally tipped the scales. This is the straw that's broken the camel's back, and people start to cover this a little bit more because this needs to be talked about. We're going down a very dark path here. And I know cookies are bad, but this is so much worse. This is real bad. So thank you to all the Lunduke Journal subscribers, by the way, who have made all of this coverage possible. Literally, if we weren't covering this, that would be it. That would be it. And I'm telling you right now, this is going to get so much worse over the next couple of months because Mozilla is going to be very desperate, right? But this is a very winnable battle. right? This is a very winnable battle. And that's the thing, but we have to talk about it publicly in order to do it. It's possible because of you. So if you haven't subscribed yet, lunduke.locals.com, lunduke.com, please subscribe. Make this work possible. I'm going to keep going at it because this is important. This is important. And not because I need to preserve cookies, but because our privacy as individuals is important. I do not want less privacy for me or for you. It sucks. And Mozilla they're the enemy. At this point, they've set themselves up as the enemy, and they're going to continue, guarantee it, they're going to continue cloaking their actions in words that sound good. Oh, cookies are evil. We're going to fight for you. We're going to fight for privacy. We're going to protect your privacy attributions. Like, we read the details. We know how this works. You're not fooling us anymore, Mozilla. You're not going to fool anyone anymore. So again, thank you to everyone for making this possible. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the intertube, I do declare end broadcast. I have to click the right button first. There it is. I found it. That's right. Huzzah. And again, end broadcast.